Good evening. This is Paranormal Science Lab Live. I'm Lisa.
I'm John.
And we're glad to have you with us this evening. We have a very interesting guest tonight. We're very excited. Mark Anthony. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Mark is an attorney as well as a professional psychic medium and an author of the book Never Letting Go, dealing with grief and using the other side as a means of coping with grief. And I think that's a fascinating subject. Mark, we have a sort of a kindred past there. I'm an attorney by day as well. What got you into the paranormal field?
Well, my family is full of psychics and mediums, including both of my parents. So I was born into it, and I'm the only one that's ever gone public, so to speak, and done it professionally. So it's always been part of me, and as you know from being an attorney yourself, everything we do involves evidence. You have to present evidence if you're going to prove your case in court. And what appeals to me about mediumship is it also involves evidence. Because if I just go around saying, oh, you know, they love you, they forgive you, they want you to feel happy, that proves absolutely nothing. In a communication, in direct contact with a spiritual entity, I have to bring forth pieces of evidence about the person who is on the other side to verify their identity and the validity of the contact. So by using evidence, it helps people understand that the person that they love hasn't disintegrated into nothingness, that he or she lives on in an eternal state. And I believe, Lisa, that that's an extremely healing thing for people to be able to experience.
Well, I agree, because I think it's very frightening, very disconcerting, and of course everyone questions their own issues of their thoughts of mortality too. So what types of evidence do you feel that are compelling?
Kind of funny. I'm glad that you asked. Good story, and I posted this on Facebook on my like page last week. About a week or so ago, I was in Houston, and I was on television on Great Day Houston, and then that night and the following evening, I appeared at a bookstore, Body, Mind, and Soul, and I conducted a gallery reading, and there was about 100 people there. So I called on this one family, and it was a mother, and she had her 2 adult sons, and one of the sons, I'm 6'1", and this guy, I was looking up to him. I mean, he had to be like 6'5". I mean, just this huge 250-pound bruiser. I mean, this guy was just, and he was giving me, he was like real intense looking, and I kept saying that, his grandfather had come through, and I was giving pieces of evidence that his mother and his other brother were validating and confirming. And I said to this guy, I go, there's something about a bat, the creature a bat. Do bats make sense with you? And he just stared at me and just kind of like grunted, go. Well, 2 days later, I get this email from him, and it starts with, hey, I was the big fella, and I knew immediately as soon as I saw that, I knew who it was. He said, I was the big fella that was there, and you said something about a bat, and you kept talking about bats. He said, well, I blank you not. I'm not going to say on the air what he said. I blank you not. When I got home, there was a bat flying around in my bedroom, and I have a phobia of bats. And I'm laughing because I can't imagine this guy being scared of anything that's a bat. He said, and my wife, and she was there with him, and she was like this, little itty-bitty lady. He said, my wife and his girlfriend had to catch it in a bag, and I ran downstairs to get away from it. And he said, I just thought you should know. I thought that was very, very confirming. And what I explained to him, first off, I thanked him for being such a good sport. And I said, look, I do not inflict biblical plagues of locusts, frogs, or in this case, bats upon anybody. Okay, I don't do that. I'm just a conduit for the information as it comes through. And what it was, his grandfather wanted to make sure that he realized this was him. because the whole time the guy was kind of like, no, 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 I don't believe this. Now, things like this certainly don't happen in every reading, but I could go on, Lisa, with stories like this for a couple hours. So there's many ways that spirits can present validation to us. This one just happened to be, well, getting beat over the head literally with a bat.
That makes sense. I mean, not something obviously that you could have known. So, I mean, that certainly, I mean, that's something that, dispels the skepticism.
Well, I'm very critical of other mediums, maybe not vocally, but when I watch them. When I see people that say, oh, she's around you and she loves you and she wants to, say you're just a great person. Well, that's really nice, and everybody wants to hear that, but I think that you need evidence. And without going into a long story again, I was doing a reading for a woman over the telephone, and her husband's spirit came through, and I said, your husband keeps talking about an octopus. Now, that's a strange thing, an octopus. And she started laughing. And I said, well, what? She goes, well, we used to live in Belize, and we lived on the water. We used to catch lobsters, and we kept them in this big tank. And then one morning, my husband and I walked out in our backyard where the tank was overlooking the water, and an octopus had climbed up out of the ocean and was stealing our lobsters. She said, do you think that's what he's talking about? And I replied, well, how many people have an octopus story? So I'm kind of thinking, yeah.
That's true, That's pretty specific.
That's pretty funny.
That is pretty funny. I mean, it's no different than, as you said, by other mediums. It's really no different than, say, in court when you bring the family member in as a character witness. Well, we all know what's going to be said. So, I mean, you can always say a family member is, wishing well type thing, and John just said.
I'm in criminal law, and I get all these letters from women that I'm a mother who believes in her son. And it's like, yeah, I remember watching TV when they executed Ted Bundy, and his mother was out there saying, don't execute my son. And let's face it, moms go to bat for their kids. And like you just said, you bring in a character witness who's a family member, well, what are they going to say? Yeah, he's nice, and he would never do these terrible type of things, despite what the 10 eyewitnesses are saying.
Exactly. So you have to have something that's specific to dispel skeptics.
I'm still curious about the guy's wife and girlfriend having to catch the bat. Did I hear that correctly?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he said they grabbed a garbage bag, a paper bag, and they were chasing it around his bedroom, and they caught it. And the funny thing, this guy, like I said, he was like 6'5", 250 pounds. He said he flipped out because he has a phobia of bats, which, of course, he did not mention during the gallery reading when I kept saying, does a bat mean anything to you? Is a bat significant? And he just stared at me and said, no, like that. And so apparently his wife and her friend were able to trap the bat, and they let it loose. But he said he doesn't know how it got in there. They have no idea. And I take no responsibility for the bat being there. I just see things. Okay, and like I said, I don't inflict plagues or send bats after people. I mean, if I could do things like that, I would just conjure up winning lottery and Powerball numbers. I mean, why would I waste my time with bats?
Right, and then you would be on the beach in Belize.
I would be, yes, with the lobster stealing octopus.
That's right.
Maybe with a wife and a girlfriend.
And maybe.
I don't want a wife I don't want a wife or a girlfriend. Neither one of them appeal to me.
You're just gun shy.
Scare the hell out of me either way.
Oh.
See this face? Sensitive.
Yeah, scary.
I'm sensitive.
You're sensitive, huh?
Yeah, look.
Well, at least you're not dressed as the Gypsy Queen.
I could have been.
King,
you were supposed to bring me a
I was.
Headband.
Yes, I was.
You said I have a headband so you can be the Gypsy King on the show.
I will bring it next week. I am sorry.
Gypsy King Off-White, that is my stage name, by the way. Go ahead, on with your questioning. Line of questioning, please, Your Honor.
I'm going to hurt you later. I really am. I never know what to expect. Sorry about that.
I'm the only
Lisa,
non-lawyer on the show. I feel kind of like the third wheel, kind of hanging out over here. I'm probably like the guy you guys are representing. Mark's probably be the one that would be like, like the prosecuting attorney. You're my defender. I feel like the one on trial is what I feel like right now.
Why?
Have you seen me?
All the time.
I
yes.
look like somebody that you would have on trials.
Well, all right. I got to tell you a story that was funny. I was representing this guy who was a member of the Warlocks motorcycle club, if you will, and he was a scary-looking dude. I mean, he looked like Charles Manson. He had the long hair, the beard, he had the tats, and all that. And I was telling him that we're going to trial, and I want him to wear a shirt to cover up his tats and get a shave. And he said, yeah. And he had this real deep voice. He goes, well, if the jury can't accept me for who I am, then F them. And I said, well, that's the problem. If they accept you for who you are, you're totally getting convicted because you scare me, okay? And I'm your lawyer, and you terrify me. So anyway, he said, all right, fine, I'll do it. So anyway, he gets cleaned up, shaves, and he wore like a nice button-down shirt. And so during jury selection, I asked the jury, I said, what do you think of my client? Does he make anybody feel anything? And one woman raised her hand and she giggled and she said, he looks like that movie star Charles Bronson. And I'm like, that's great. He went from looking like Charles Manson to Charles Bronson simply because he shaved and put on a nice shirt. I look over at my client, he's like, cool.
Yeah, it's scary, some of those conversations you have to have with clients, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your book, Never Letting Go, Dealing with Grief, because I think a lot of people will be interested in that. Tell us what brought you to write that.
Never Letting Go, it was a labor of love. What happened when my mother died, she was a medium, and we were very close. And people think that if you're a medium, that somehow we're immune to grief, but we're not. So I started going to group counseling at the local Catholic church. And I noticed that I seemed to be recovering a lot quicker than other group members. And what our sessions turned into is, well, I could start seeing all of the other group members' deceased loved ones around them. I started saying things like, well, maybe if your father was here, he would want you to know this. And maybe if your son was here, he would. And the facilitator of the group, really sweet lady, she's from Ireland, and she knew what was going on, and she pulled me aside on a break. She goes, you know, Mark, you can't be talking to spirits here in the church. I go, yeah, we're in a church. Isn't that kind of what we do? I mean, it's like, and this is Catholic church, so we just don't have God. We got Mary and Jesus and angels and saints and all kinds of things. And so anyway, I decided to stop going, and about a month later, this elderly woman who had been in the group saw me at a grocery store. And this lady, real sweet lady, she was about 85, 86 years old, came up to me and she held my hand and she said, Mark, would you please come back to the group? You made us feel better. Oh. And that, it started a spark in me. And I said, you know, I've got to write a book about how being able to communicate with spirits or receive messages from them helps people cope with the grieving process. Because what I've found, Lisa, is that the greatest fear of all, I think, is that someone that meant so much to you has completely disintegrated into nothing. And that's not true. And I know that the two of you do a lot of research and work in the whole paranormal field, and we can call them ghosts or spiritual entities or whatever. But what we call physical life is not the end, and we go on. And I think it's very healing. Now, I get a lot of religious people going, well, I don't need you. I've got my faith. And all I can say to them is, good for you. If that's what works for you, then that's fine. But a lot of people, and I'm a big proponent of religion, and I don't crash anyone's religion, but I've had so many people beyond me keeping count say, I'm sorry, but reading scripture doesn't cut it for me. I'm devastated. I need more than just, Psalm number whatever. And for some people, reading Scripture is extremely healing and extremely comforting, and I think that's fantastic. For other people, they feel that just praying is wonderful, and if that's the case, then that's what you should do. But a lot of people from all over the world have come to me, and they find that the direct connection with their loved one is an important step in the journey through grief.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly, and John and I both are sensitive, so I'm more of an empath.
I cry a lot.
And he's more than an empath. That he's rather modest about it. But we do a lot of events and public education events, and we always tell people that everything's energy, and you can't destroy energy. It just can be transformed. And so, very, very true. I mean, that energy remains in some form. And I'm like you. I think that connection has a lot more personal meaning to me than written word.
Oh, absolutely. And knowing that beyond this form is more gives people more hope than anything. And being it words or knowing, but I think it gives them more to know that there is something else out there for them to look forward to.
And I think it's wonderful for someone like you, Mark, when you do your events, because I think that for most people, I think there's a lot of people out there that want that personal validation and, something that they know has to come from that loved one. But I think a lot of people are timid to ask for that because society tells them that they should be satisfied with Scripture or prayer.
Well, what I've found is that God exists in spite of religion, not because of religion. And well, and where religions go wrong is everyone is convinced their way is the one and only way, and that everybody else is wrong. And certainly the evangelists in this country can be really annoying about that. When you want to take that type of fundamentalist extremism to its ultimate extreme, look at what's going on in Iraq right now with those insane religious fanatics, ISIS, where they're burying people alive, beheading people, murdering hundreds and possibly thousands of people simply because they don't believe in the form of Islam that they do. And and the thing is, they're not just killing Christians and Yazidis, they're killing Muslims that aren't part of their, whacked out version of it. And that's why separation of church and state is so important. And you always hear in this country, well, we need to get God into school and we need to get God here. Well, I went to Catholic school, so that was never an issue. I mean, we went to Mass every day and we prayed. But I look at it as it's the responsibility of the family for religious education. It's the responsibility of the school system to make sure kids do not say things like, I seen it and I went there because I need to ask you a question about your business. Okay?
Sorry. Go ahead, Mark. He's reacting to something in the chat room.
No, I'm reacting to ask you a question is what I'm
I know, and it's like, should I ask you an answer? And I sit there and you hear people that have come through our school system, and it's amazing. So let's have respect for everyone's religion, but I don't want to see government funds being put into that either way. I'd rather our children be able to find France on a map, construct a sentence, and be able to balance a checkbook.
I agree.
Amen, brother.
Yeah.
Well, 50 years ago they taught Latin and Greek in college. Now they teach remedial English. What is going wrong with this country?
Slackers. We're becoming slackers.
Well, in that regard. Yeah, we can get into a whole other thing about politics. I could even go into politics at this point. But I agree with you 100% that this country is based on freedom of religion. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So nobody is allowed to say anything to anyone, especially in the school system, about their faith. If you want to sit on the street corner and preach to me, that's fine, but don't force it into our children. Allow them to make their decisions based on their own family belief system.
And we won't even go into the fact that, as Marcus, I'm sure you're aware that the founding fathers believed in God, little g, not big G.
Right.
Most of them were theists. They weren't Christian. And a lot of the founding fathers' papers will say that the founding documents didn't have anything to do with Christianity when they mention God.
Well, and the founding fathers also believed that women had no business being part of government or voting. They believed that slavery was fine, and it was an incredibly male-dominated, misogynistic, imperialistic type of belief system. And, if you could connect with the founding fathers, we may hear, so now, who's that in the White House?
Exactly.
Isn't that one of Thomas Jefferson's kids?
Exactly. That's a very... Well, in fact, there were just a couple of founding fathers that didn't have slaves. It's...
I know the father of our country, George Washington, was a slave owner. Thomas Jefferson, one of the most brilliant men ever to occupy the White House, probably the smartest president we've ever had, not only owned slaves, but slept with them. I remember Oprah Winfrey did a show where it was a reunion of all the Thomas Jefferson's descendants, and half the people on one side of the room were black, and the other half were white. Yes. And so when you look back at what the founding fathers wanted, I'm not so sure I want to live in the world that the founding fathers wanted.
Right. A static constitution is not necessarily a good thing.
No. And the thing is, and they too, now in their defense, they also realized that, which is why they made provisions for the Constitution to be able to be amended. Because, quite frankly, the mores and the economics of the horse and buggy era certainly don't apply in the nuclear age. So, but anyway, we're getting off on a topic. But I am an attorney, and I am a legal and political analyst as well, and I've appeared on a number of shows talking about K.C. Anthony and Trayvon Martin, and I'm sure that the Mike Brown shooting in Ferguson, and I really hate seeing how all these tensions are coming up. So let's just hope that all our brothers and sisters of all faiths and racial backgrounds, that we can realize that we love our children more than we hate each other.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And don't worry about our show going off on a tangent. We do that. We just have to with it.
Right. We talk about what's interesting.
We talk about what comes up is what usually happens.
And
well, there's a lot of interesting things going on in the world right now. And it's hard not to look back to the 1930s. There's a lot of people saying, we're not ready to engage ISIS, we're not ready to engage Putin, we're not ready to do this. And I remember seeing a quote of a discussion that Winston Churchill had with the Prime Minister of Britain at the time, Neville Chamberlain, and Churchill said, we must take action against Hitler. And Chamberlain said, well, we're not ready. And Chamberlain said, we're not ready. And Churchill replied, war will find us, whether we are ready for it or not. And I'm hoping that the Western nations, the U.S. and Europe and Russia, wake up and realize that jihad will find us, whether we're ready for it or not. It already has. We've gotten a little bit complacent. And the thing is, religious extremism, to me, is more dangerous than communism ever was. The communists weren't stupid. They knew that, we attack the United States, they're going to nuke us back, and the Chinese get that too. But when you have people that think if they die for their cause, they're going to end up with, this paradise reward and 72.5 virgins or whatever the silliness that they're being fed is, how do you prevail against people who play by no rules, have no respect for human life, and use the false pretext of a belief in God for their own egotistical driven agendas? So that's where separation of church and state is so very important in this country. And when the evangelicals say we need to get God into the courtroom and the church and into the classroom, they're meaning their fundamentalist Christian beliefs. They're not saying, oh, we need to start making our students pray 5 times a day facing Mecca or put up statues of the elephant god Ganesha from Hinduism. So we have to not only respect our religions, but realize that it's not just freedom of religion, it's freedom from religion. And so anyway, I know I'm on my soapbox right now, but I get attacked daily by religious fanatics who say, mediums are not of God and you are evil. And it's like, yeah, well, I don't limit my life to primitive Bronze Age superstitions. I look to evidence and my own personal connection with God and how it has helped tens of thousands of people that I've encountered throughout the world.
And I'm a firm believer that, if you allow yourself to, I think everybody has the ability to listen to their intuition and can be clairvoyant to a certain extent. I think It's allowing yourself to tap into what God, universe, whatever you call it, provides. I mean, we're all connected by this string anyway, so why can't we tap into that and use it? And that's what I tell people. That they ask me how I do it, and that's it. I just allow it. I don't fight it. I don't think bad about it. I don't call it anything other than what it is. And that to me opens you up to a whole other world. And I think
that's a very good point, where you said that you don't fight it, you allow it, because what's happening is we all have the ability to receive messages. And the thing is, praying is when we talk to God, meditation's when we listen. And when people say that you're crazy if you hear spirits and hear voices that are coming from God. But the thing is, this is a gift from God. And when you acknowledge that, it's a beautiful, a wonderful, and a healing thing. And everybody is capable of it to varying degrees.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think it's coming full circle, because I think that when we talk about the old pagan ways, the old ways before modern religion, it was more accepted. The traditions accepted those abilities more, and I think we're kind of coming back around to accepting what's already there instead of doubting ourselves. And that's what society has done, is made people doubt themselves.
Well, and they've moved away from the earth-based religion, if I can put that out. And I think that people are coming around to that too. If you look at the world today, people are concerned with how we're living and what we're doing to the earth, not what religion you are. And there's still fanatics out there. There's always going to be fanatics. It's just the way it is. But, people, I think the mass of the population is starting to understand what the pagan belief system really was.
Right.
And not that it was satanic in any way. It was actually loving, but that's a whole. I can get into another show on that one. Anyway.
That sounds fun.
It is.
Well, people in my upcoming book, which is tentatively entitled Evidence of Eternity, and it's due out in March of 2015. One of the things I discuss is that God is infinite and beyond our ability to comprehend. And it is very normal and natural for people to want to put a finite, limited face upon God so that we can understand God. Now, whether that face is Zeus or Vishnu or Jesus or whatever religion, it's to bring the infinite down to a more personal level. So in that aspect, there's nothing wrong about it. But what happens is it turns into a very primitive us versus they syndrome. Oh, our interpretation is correct. In the entire universe of multiverses, it must be interpreted by the Church of the Right Wing in Westboro, Omaha, and that everyone else is an infidel and must burn in the fires of hell. And it's like, really?
I gotta know, Mark, do you use voice in the courtroom?
I do. I got in trouble one time because we were on a break, and the judge walked in the courtroom, and he walked up to the table where I was sitting with some other attorneys, and he said, "I hear you do a really good version of me. Let's hear it."
And you'd be surprised how many attorneys are kind of in that ballpark, and you have to watch themselves about what voice they use in front of who.
I can imagine, yeah. I can imagine I'm sitting next to one of them.
Never, never, never. I'm an angel.
Yeah, I'm following one. Anyway, hey, that's a fat roll. Not chunky monkey.
Well, and I think too, getting back to the subject, I think part of the issue has become that religion has put itself between the individual and God, and convinced people that they don't have a direct conduit to the divine.
It does. Jesus said the kingdom of God is within, and Jesus talked about a direct connect to God. And then churchianity came around, where we have a monopoly. This organization has a monopoly on God and how to get through God, and you have to do it through our dogma and through our clerics. And I saw a bumper sticker recently. It made me crack up. It said, "My karma ran over your dogma."
Yeah.
Yes. I used to have that sticker.
I heard something today. You were talking about somebody in between the divine and or the divine mystery of the universe and people, and Jesus actually said, Jesus didn't say that heaven was up here. Jesus said heaven is here, and that's what people forget, is that he is basically saying that God is everywhere, and I'm a firm believer in that sense anyway. But so I mean, it's just. I think people are coming there. I think people are coming full circle on that. I think it's an understanding. Reading.
I'm reading the chat room.
I'm an angel soul. Look at this face, people.
Well, I mean, Archangel Michael is supposed to be the one that takes on all the negative energies. I'm sure he doesn't come out. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the way I think of Archangel Michael, he's a big bruiser. It's like.
Well, then I'll keep you by my side then.
I'm a big chicken. That's really what she's always trying to drag me into scary places.
Yeah, he's a paranormal investigator that claims he's a chicken.
I am.
But do you find that once you start communicating with these entities, that they're not? A lot of the ghost hunters are like, it's demonic, and my experience has been, a spirit's pure energy, and when his or her energy field interacts with my body's electrical field, I get tingling, cold chills, which is the physiological response we get during fear. However, it does not necessarily mean the entity is trying to scare me or be negative. It's an energy interface. We tend to jump to assumptions and conclusions before getting all the facts and data. And part of what I try to explain in Never Letting Go in my book is that there's nothing scary about spirit contact. When spirits who love you, people who love you, are reaching out from the other side to communicate with you, they're doing so because they want to come to your rescue to help you heal. And that's why the subtitle of the book is Healing Grief with Help from the Other Side. Because they want to help us. They don't like seeing us suffer. Hell's here on earth. Because we don't need some jerk with a pitchfork to make life miserable or to motivate us to do negative things. Hell is here on earth, and I was talking to someone very close to me, my aunt. She lost both her husband and her son within 5 days of each other about 3 weeks ago. Just terrible situation. And we were talking about hell, and I said, "Well, you're in it right now," and for anyone who's lost a loved one, that's hell. And it is absolutely horrific. But the one thing is, we are able to emerge from it. And it isn't easy, and it does take a long time, and it takes commitment and faith and a lot of doubts. But you can endure it, you can survive it, and you can emerge from it. And that's the work that I do as a psychic medium, as a lecturer, guest speaker, paranormal expert, and as an author, is to help people understand that God exists, that heaven exists, and that our soul's an immortal living spirit that we can communicate to, and that when it is our time to leave this world, we will see our loved ones in the light that is God.
Oh, I agree. Mark, I'm kind of curious, what are your thoughts on reincarnation?
Not only do I believe in it, but in fact, in my next book, I talk about it, Never Letting Go. In my next book, I go into it much deeper. All the near-death experience researchers that are my colleagues that have written books on this, near-death experience research, and I'm sure that your listeners are aware of that, but just in case they're not, people who have a near-death experience clinically die. Their heart stops. For all intents and purposes, they're dead. Their consciousness leaves their body, and then they go into the light, and they encounter loved ones who have passed, yet they come back because they're resuscitated. And pretty much, I'd say well over 95% of the people who have had near-death experiences have all said that reincarnation is a fact, because that's part of the information that they get from the other side. There's also been several documented cases of people recalling prior lives with such detail that there is no other explanation other than they were that person. So I'm a firm believer in it, and that's why we don't have hell. You don't need hell, because we have reincarnation. So whatever you do, there are consequences. So basically, be nice.
I agree, because I do think, you deal with the consequences of what you do, either in this lifetime or another. So.
Well, and really, that's what we were talking about pretty deep into religions a minute ago, and I thought a meme come across. I love Facebook and all the little memes. At least I share every one of them I get. But
he's bored.
I get bored at work. But anyway, one of them that was going around said that Jesus wasn't a Christian, Muhammad wasn't a Muslim, and Buddha wasn't a Buddhist. Their religion was love, and that's so much truth, especially for anybody that's studied spirituality, like most of us have on the show. And if we go down to the baseline of all of it, it's all about caring about each other, the right thing. I mean, I don't, so reincarnation, I think, is just part of that. Where we come back to learn the crap that we did wrong this time, and here we go again.
Yeah.
Sometimes we keep reliving it.
Yeah, sometimes it's the same lesson multiple times if you don't get it right. But
the fascinating thing about reincarnation is that it's at the root of all the major religions, including Judaism and Christianity. In the mystical sect of Judaism, the Chassidic sect, there's a discussion of a series of lifetimes until there is no more need to be born again. And then in the New Testament, Jesus was having a discussion with his disciples after the Transfiguration, where Jesus and Moses appear either side of Jesus. Moses and Elijah. Hello, mediumship. Okay. And the disciples say, well, who are you? And Jesus said, well, who do you say that I am? Well, some say that you are Elijah returned. Others say that you are John the Baptist. Jesus replied to them, Elijah has returned, but they did not recognize him, for he appeared in the form of John the Baptist. Okay, Elijah lived about 800 years earlier. Mm-hmm. So if that isn't a discussion of reincarnation, I don't know what is. And then in the 2 centuries after Jesus' death, reincarnation, particularly in the Christian sect in Alexandria, Egypt, under the tutelage of Origen of Alexandria. He was a great wise theologian. He talked about a series of lifetimes until everyone, including Satan, would emerge from darkness and be with God. But then in the Fifth Ecumenical Council in the year, I believe it was like 527, 530 AD, reincarnation was eliminated from Christian belief systems because the Roman/Byzantine Emperor Justinian the Great and the Christian bishops wanted to make sure that everybody in the empire looked to the emperor as Jesus' representative on earth, and if you disobeyed him and didn't tithe, then you were committing sins. So once again, it was money, which was the causation for reincarnation being eliminated. So the fact remains, all the great teachers, from Krishna through Buddha, through Jesus, through Gandhi, have all talked about reincarnation.
Well, exactly, and it was the Council of Nicaea that introduced the idea of Christ as divine, and made that dogma. And really, that's a departure from every other major religion in the world to have that view, and it was definitely done for political reasons.
Well, of course. Of course. Well, what was going on is that at that time, the Roman Empire, the religion of the gods up on Mount Olympus, nobody was believing that anymore. The army was basically following the religion of Mithras, who was the Persian sun god. Christianity was running rampant through the empire. And so the imperial decree was that the Roman emperor, in that case Constantine, was emperor and God's representative on earth, and that Jesus would return. But until then, Constantine would be the representative, and therefore all the Roman emperors subsequent to that. And that's where the divine right of kings started. So it was, once again, a Roman creation, a way of monopolizing what people believed, and the people in the empire were like, okay, we'll do that, and it just sort of flowed from there.
And another thing that people have a misconception about is that Constantine converted on his deathbed, and it was the realization that for peace in the empire, that it made sense to ratify the religion, and where some try to make it that he had this long conversion and everything. It was a deathbed situation based on secession and political stability.
Yeah, it absolutely. And it's funny because I've studied classical history, and when I went to Catholic school, Constantine the Great, the first Christian emperor, he's one of the superstars of the Catholic Church. When you read what he was really like, he had a lot of his family members executed. Okay, he was a bloodthirsty general. He was a paranoid politician. If he felt for a second that somebody was a threat, they and their family were annihilated. And towards the end of his life, he used to wear this multicolored wig and this really outrageous robe, and he made everyone lay on their stomachs when they approached him. I mean, this guy was nuts. But, hey, he was the first Christian emperor, and he turned into a superstar. But the fact remains, he was a very, very skillful and ruthless politician.
Exactly.
I agree. Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that people forget is when you talk about religion through history, most of it does come down. A lot of religious history comes down to politics and power structure.
Yeah, fear and control.
Yeah. Well, that's one reason that for over 1,000 years, Mass was conducted in Latin, so the average person, they had no idea what was being said, so that conduit had to come through the priest.
Right. Conduit.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, that was their only way, and they had no idea what was going on. It was just a matter of control. And I think it's that viewpoint that still, I mean, we deal with people who are having paranormal experiences that have a more fundamentalist background, that they have a really hard time accepting what's happening to them because of that conditioning, that it's evil, that it's demonic, etc. And it comes from that same history.
Right.
Yeah, it's amazing how people like us, and I'm including you, both of you, we talk about God, we talk about the afterlife. On one hand, we have the people who say they're skeptics, but they're not skeptics. They're just closed-minded people who say we're nuts and it's impossible and you're crazy and you're charlatans. Then on the other hand, we have the religious fanatics who say we're evil and terrible and the way we talk about God isn't right because it's not the way they think about God. And it cracks me up because it's like, good Lord, we get it from both ends.
Right.
And when you get rid of the fear and the control, just like you were just saying, and begin to study God as this incredible energy of love and light in creation, there's none of this dogmatic paranoia and narrow-mindedness. And it gets me when religious fanatics write negative things on my website or on my Facebook page, and they're like, you're wrong, mediums are not of God, this is evil, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, did you miss the whole don't judge lesson? So you are not righteous, you are self-righteous, sanctimonious, and holier than thou, and completely acting in contradiction to all Christian morals and mores, because you have now elevated yourself to judge, which is reserved for God. Well, they don't like it when you tell them that.
No, they don't.
Okay.
And aside from the fact that they ignore the whole aspect of their teachings that deal with prophecy and prophets.
Yeah, seers are in the Bible.
Yeah.
More than once.
Yeah, like
literally ideas.
I mean, we could go even as far as saying that God's been referred to as them, us, and them. So, them, us, and they. That's what I was thinking. Them, us, and they. So, I mean, and so who is them, us, and they? There's a lot of questions in the Bible that don't make a whole lot of sense, and people actually read it for what it is. And I have a very dear friend of mine that's a reverend up in Kansas City, and the parables are there to make us think. They're there to really drive the information home and make us think for ourselves, and that's what it's all about. So, and I study a pretty earth-based faith system, but I also read the Bible. I think there's some excellent lessons in there to learn. And
actually, the scriptures of all the world religions all have very worthwhile teachings and are pretty much the same.
I learned how to save $1 from some of my very dear Jewish friends.
You don't say.
Yeah. What?
You are in a mood today, I have to say.
I told you I was drinking before the show.
No, you said you were having a cookie.
Oh, same difference in my world.
Mark, if someone is in a situation where they're dealing with grief and they're interested in pursuing assistance through a medium or through the other side, what is your recommendation to them? I mean, I highly recommend that they get your book, but what is your real recommendation for people?
And I'm glad you brought that up. In my book, Never Letting Go, there's a chapter about how to reach out to the other side. But for the benefit of the listeners, check out the medium that you want to go to. Now, if people go to my website, you can see videos of me conducting readings for people, television interviews that I've done, and television shows where I've conducted readings. If you go to a psychic or a medium who wants you to start coming on a multiple basis, like, oh, there's a negative spirit attached to you, you need to come 3 times a week, you need to turn and run, because those are the people. Well, there was a prosecution in South Florida. I commented on this on NBC Miami about this family, the Marks family, their group of gypsies, and they bilked people, about a couple dozen people, out of over $30 million. And one author, Jude Devereaux, whose little boy was killed in an accident, They roped her in, persuaded her that her son's soul was in peril, and they got something like $4 or $5 million, I think it was $3 or $4 million out of her. So if you'll notice, with legitimate psychics like myself, I tell people one reading should be enough. If you want another reading, you have to wait at least 6 months. Because I get people, they want to come all the time. And it's like, no, you get the reading, you need to absorb it, you need to progress in your healing process. I have one client, and she's like clockwork every 6 months, but the problem is, every time she asks the same questions, she wants to hear what she wants to hear, and the thing is, I convey what is conveyed to me. I do not tell people what they want to hear, because that would be dereliction of duty. In other words, I've got to do what I am supposed to do, and that's convey messages. The really good thing is the last time I did a reading for her, it seemed like finally she's starting to get it. Because a lot of people, they feel guilty that a loved one has died. They want to blame themselves, and they want to create this unending cycle of misery because they feel on a subconscious level that if I'm totally miserable, that's somehow a good thing, and that's helping my loved one in spirit. And it is not good for you, and it is not good for your loved one in spirit. What spirits want you to do is to be able to accept the reality of the death, and through that acceptance, come to a point of inner peace.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. I think people don't think about it that direction either, that there is an effect on spirit as well.
Oh, there is. In Never Letting Go, I talk about how we anchor spirits here, and I like to clarify that because we can't anchor them. Because the thing is, they're pure energy. They're moving at least at light speed. What we're anchoring is ourselves. We're anchoring our ability to progress, and spirits will stay with us and constantly visit us to see how we're doing. But they're not with us 24/7. I mean, they're off doing whatever it is that they do, and I don't know. I ask, what do you do? And the general response is, well, you can't understand it. And I said, well, yeah, that's fine. I know you always say that, but what do you do? And one spirit in particular said, it's we're learning and we're evolving, and it's development and growth. But beyond me being able to say that, it would be virtually, she said, it is impossible for you to understand because it's so incredible. And then she said, why don't you focus on your problems and what you're doing there? Because that's what you need to be learning, is how to react to the difficulties of your existence instead of worrying about the next phase when you get here. So it was kind of like, yeah, it's great over here and we're learning, but you need to learn where you are, and you need to learn the lessons that are presented to you as opposed to, jumping from, junior high school to postgraduate level.
That makes sense.
I agree with that. I think that we take on these these skin bodies to experience this here. We're here to learn something here. And every time we come, we're there to, enlighten ourselves and to learn and to grow and help others grow with us.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's very well said. I think that's a good way. In fact, we'll probably borrow that a little bit for some of our events because I really like that description, if you don't mind. Mark, if anyone's interested in getting your book or
actually, I just saw one of his books sold. Somebody bought one while we were on the show.
Yeah, someone in the chat room just said they just bought your book. So, what's the best way for them to get a hold of the book, or if they're interested in a gallery, etc., how to contact you?
The best way to get hold of me or to find out about my book is naturally through my website, which is neverlettinggo.com. Same title as my book, neverlettinggo.com. And that page will tell you how to find Never Letting Go. It gives you the links where to buy it from Walmart or Amazon or Barnes & Noble. There's also the calendar of events, on my website, which will tell you what shows I'll be on and public appearances I'll be engaging in. There's also a section that I invite everybody who's coping with the loss of a loved one called Grief Management. And this is a resource. It's on the page. It's free. It's open to everybody on coping strategies on getting through the death of a loved one. Also, you can like my Facebook page because my staff and I, we keep it updated constantly with where I'm going to be doing gallery readings, and for information on one-on-one readings, you can find that also at neverlettinggo.com.
Awesome. Mark, we really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope to have you back in the future for more topics, perhaps when your new book comes out, and it was a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, it was a great show, man. Thank you for being here.
Thanks. I had a lot of fun with you guys, and to all the listeners, God bless you.
Thank you. And to you. Thank you very much.
And everyone stays tuned for Selena Rowan. She's Closer to Your Death with Steven LaChance. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
I get this email from him, and it starts with, "Hey, I was the big fella," and I knew immediately as soon as I saw that, I knew who it was. He said, "I was the big fella that was there, and you said something about a bat, and you kept talking about bats." He said, "Well, I blank you not." I'm not going to say on the air what he said. "I blank you not. When I got home, there was a bat flying around in my bedroom, and I have a phobia of bats." And I'm laughing because I can't imagine this guy being scared of anything much less a bat. He said, "And my wife," and she was there with him, and she was like this, little itty bitty lady. He said, "My wife and his girlfriend had to catch it in a bag, and I ran downstairs to get away from it." And he said, "I just thought you should know. I thought that was very, very confirming." And what I explained to him, first off, I thanked him for being such a good sport. And I said, "Look, I do not inflict biblical plagues of locusts, frogs, or in this case, bats upon anybody." Okay, I don't do that. I'm just a conduit for the information as it comes through. And what it was, his grandfather wanted to make sure that he realized this was him. Because the whole time the guy was kind of like, no, I don't believe this. Now, things like this certainly don't happen in every reading, but I could go on, Lisa, with stories like this for a couple hours. So there's many ways that spirits can present validation to us. This one just happened to be, well, getting beat over the head literally with a bat.
That makes sense. It's not something obviously that you could have known. So, that's certainly, that's something that, dispels the skepticism.
Execute my son. And let's face it, moms go to bat for their kids. And like you just said, you bring in a character witness who's a family member, well, what are they going to say? Yeah, he's nice, and he would never do these terrible type of things, despite what the 10 eyewitnesses are saying.
Exactly. So you have to have something that's specific to dispel skeptics.
I'm still curious about the guy's wife and girlfriend having to catch the bat. Did I hear that correctly?
Oh, yeah. He said they grabbed a garbage bag, a paper bag, and they were chasing it around his bedroom, and they caught it. And the funny thing, this guy, like I said, he was like 6'5", 250 pounds. He said he flipped out because he has a phobia of bats, which, of course, he did not mention during the gallery reading when I kept saying, "Does a bat mean anything to you? Is a bat significant?" And he just stared at me and said, "No," like that. And so apparently his wife and her friend were able to trap the bat, and they let it loose. But he said he doesn't know how it got in there. They have no idea. And I take no responsibility for the bat being there. I just see things. Okay, and like I said, I don't inflict plagues or send bats after people. If I could do things like that, I would just conjure up winning lottery and Powerball numbers. Why would I waste my time with bats?
Right, and then you would be on the beach in Belize.
I would be, yes, with the lobster stealing octopus.
That's right.
Maybe with a wife and a girlfriend.
And maybe.
I don't want a wife I don't want a wife or a girlfriend. Neither one of them appeal to me.
You're just gun shy. Good evening. This is Paranormal Science Lab Live. I'm Lisa.
I'm John.
And we're glad to have you with us this evening. We have a very interesting guest tonight. We're very excited. Mark Anthony. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Mark is an attorney as well as a professional psychic medium and an author of the book Never Letting Go, dealing with grief and using the other side as a means of coping with grief. And I think that's a fascinating subject. Mark, we have a sort of a kindred past there. I'm an attorney by day as well. What got you into the paranormal field?
Well, my family is full of psychics and mediums, including both of my parents. So I was born into it, and I'm the only one that's ever gone public, so to speak, and done it professionally. So it's always been part of me, and as you know from being an attorney yourself, everything we do involves evidence. You have to present evidence if you're going to prove your case in court. And what appeals to me about mediumship is it also involves evidence. Because if I just go around saying, oh, you know, they love you, they forgive you, they want you to feel happy, that proves absolutely nothing. In a communication, in direct contact with a spiritual entity, I have to bring forth pieces of evidence about the person who is on the other side to verify their their identity and the validity of the contact. So by using evidence, it helps people understand that the person that they love hasn't disintegrated into nothingness, that he or she lives on in an eternal state. And I believe, Lisa, that that's an extremely healing thing for people to be able to experience.
Well, I agree, because I think it's very frightening, very disconcerting, and of course everyone questions their own issues of their thoughts of mortality too. So what types of evidence do you feel that are compelling?
Kind of funny. I'm glad that you asked. Good story, and I posted this on Facebook on my like page last week. About a week or so ago, I was in Houston, and I was on television on Great Day Houston, and then that night and the following evening, I appeared at a bookstore, Body, Mind, and Soul, and I conducted a gallery reading, and there was about 100 people there. So I called on this one family, and it was a mother, and she had her 2 adult sons, and one of the sons, I'm 6'1", and this guy, I was looking up to him. I mean, he had to be like 6'5". I mean, just this huge 250-pound bruiser. I mean, this guy was just, and he was giving me, he was like real intense looking, and I kept saying that, his grandfather had come through, and I was giving pieces of evidence that his mother and his other brother were validating and confirming. And I said to this guy, I go, there's something about a bat, the creature a bat. Do bats make sense with you? And he just stared at me and just kind of like grunted, go. Well, 2 days later, well, I'm very critical of other mediums, maybe not vocally, but when I watch them. When I see people that say, oh, she's around you and she loves you and she wants to, say you're just a great person. Well, that's really nice. And everybody wants to hear that, but I think that you need evidence. And without going into a long story again, I was doing a reading for a woman over the telephone. And her husband's spirit came through. And I said, your husband keeps talking about an octopus. Now that's a strange thing, an octopus. And she started laughing. And I said, well, what? She goes, well, we used to live in Belize. And we lived on the water. We used to catch lobsters. And we kept them in this big tank. And then one morning, my husband and I walked out in our backyard where the tank was overlooking the water, and an octopus had climbed up out of the ocean and was stealing our lobsters. She said, do you think that's what he's talking about? And I replied, well, how many people have an octopus story? So I'm kind of thinking, yeah.
That's true, That's pretty specific.
That's pretty funny.
That is pretty funny. I mean, it's no different than, as you said, by other mediums. It's really no different than, say, in court when you bring the a family member in as a character witness, well, we all know what's going to be said. So, I mean, you can always say a family member is, wishing well type thing. And
well, I mean,
John just said,
I'm in criminal law, and I get all these letters from women that I'm a mother who believes in her son, and it's like, yeah, I remember watching TV when they executed Ted Bundy, and his mother was out there saying, "Don't